good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jill Gilbert, and I produce Silver Summit. This is my second year doing Silver Summit, and another amazing show called the Digital Health Summit the following 2 days. And really excited. My background is in the senior space, believe it or not. I started a company called Gilbert Guide years ago, and it's been since sold. But it was one of these things that when you thought about the senior space, which I didn't think about much, I just thought it was a really good idea. But when I learned about the graying of America, I thought, wow, this is really exciting. People are going to buy this stuff. People are going to want it. People are going to want all this information. And the reality was quickly learned on us that if you build it, they will come is not the case. And I think it's been a little bit of a personal mission of mine to make sure that we help companies, and this is not just about the companies, but we help the consumers learn, have access, and move this needle, I call it the needle forward, moving this needle forward around all of the challenges that I know a lot of you are facing and a lot of companies kind of wanting to be in this space are facing as well. So for me, CES is obviously a great opportunity to showcase innovation, but one of my sort of outside interests will be kind of taking Silver Summit outside of this and saying, how do we increase distribution channels? How do we, our last session of the day will be incredible, called Cracking the Distribution Code. How do we crack the distribution code? How are we dealing with getting not only the products into their hands, but how are we going to educate them, make them excited about it, and answer a very important question is, are we designing the right things for them? Do they not even want it? Do we think that they want it? Are we focusing on one thing and one small group and the rest of America and the world that have no interest in it? So I'm fortunate to be friends with lots and lots of innovators in this space, and I'm very excited by the opportunities, because the more I hear, the more I know that this is just about growth and about working together to make this industry grow. So anyway, that's my little mushy mission, and I'm hoping that in June, when we do this outside event that we're talking about, which we'll share more with you later, you'll be able to join us and be part of working together to open this industry up. So with that said, I want to thank our sponsors, which really help support us. United Healthcare, please make sure to go visit their exhibit downstairs. Always incredible. Learn about what they're doing. We have our lunchtime keynote will be a very special one, 50 plus in the digital age. It'll be excellent. Also, a special thanks to our gold sponsors, AARP, CEA, great call, and Resound, all of which have spaces downstairs. So I highly suggest you go visit them. We have some amazing new technologies, not only serving this industry, but serving the entire industry. So it's very exciting. So had a little change in the speakers this morning, but we got lucky. Unfortunately, Cheryl is in the hospital, and we learned yesterday was unable to attend. But I got really lucky because Gary Stromolo, who happened to deliver a keynote at the Digital Health Summit a couple years ago, was here, and so he and I had a chance to sit down. And so what we're going to do today is literally have a sit down and talk about the future in the fast lane from the point of view of Ford. So I want to invite him to the stage.
Right.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jill.
How are you?
Great.
So glad you were in Vegas.
Oh, love Vegas.
So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your role at Ford?
Sure. So I manage a department called Vehicle Design and Infotronics. I'm also the global manager for interiors, infotainment, and health and wellness research. That's a pretty big mouthful. But what we do is we look at technologies for connectivity inside the car, and we look at it from all aspects, not only from getting information into the car, but the impact that that information has on the driver's ability to safely operate the vehicle. So to that end, we have one of the largest full motion-based driving simulators in the world, Vertex, where you get into this dome, there's a full-size car in the dome, and you essentially drive a virtual world. And what we can do in that vehicle, in that environment, is monitor how you're actually operating the vehicle while you're task loaded to do other things. So we can evaluate how well HMI systems, human-machine interface systems, work, and what impact they might have on the ability of the driver to safely operate the vehicle.
It's a lot of stuff.
It's a lot of stuff, but technology is coming very fast, as you know, in this conference, obviously. There's a lot of technology that's being created, some of which could be used inside the car. And the idea is to see what information is appropriate to come into the car, and how do we present that to the driver in a way that he can quickly disseminate the information, take advantage of it, while still operating the vehicle, keeping his, like we like to say, his hands on the wheel and the eyes on the road. So
you mentioned the word infotainment. Is infotainment a proprietary word? Is this something that you guys use? And what is it? What does that mean?
So infotainment simply refers to information in an entertainment type mode. So things, either newscasts, status updates for Facebook and so on, that comes over the waves and can come into the car. And then you can process that information inside the vehicle.
Great. So I had the opportunity earlier today. I was in the speaker ready room kind of prepping for today, and I was sitting next to Christine Robbins from Jawbone, Body Media Jawbone. And she mentioned that the Futures Company published a recent study that completely debunked the issues, saying that seniors and elders expect technology, do not like technology. They completely debunked that issue. And what she was saying was that they actually just expect technology to work for them and make their lives easier.
Right.
Are you guys discovering that at all? Or?
Yeah, I think that's true. If you look at Facebook, for example, the age demographic of Facebook, you'd be surprised to see that it's really not populated to a large extent by teenagers, but by middle age and older people who can find ways to keep in track with their family through Facebook. So seniors in particular, they're interested in technology provided that it's easily accessible and gives them the information that they want without too much effort. And I think that's the real challenge that technologists have when they're creating some technology, is the interface that they create for it. How easy is it for you to access it and get that information and then use it? That's the real key. So an elderly person, technology is a double-edged sword for an elderly driver in particular, because technology will be the one way that the driver could continue to drive as he gets older. And for an elderly driver, losing the ability to drive is a tremendous stressor, because it essentially represents a loss of freedom. So what we'd like to do is to try to prolong the amount of time that an elderly driver can continue to safely drive, making sure that he is safely driving. And so technology is the key to doing that. But if technology is difficult to understand inside the vehicle, then it's actually an adder to the stress that the driver would have. So we need to balance bringing technology in, but doing it in a responsible way, so that the driver can take advantage of it and continue to drive safely.
So I think that leads us into this perfect discussion around autonomous driving. It's obviously been, the self-driving automobile that we kind of keep hearing about. Sounds awfully scary to someone like me, thinking that you just push a button and autopilot goes on. So how does Ford look at autonomous driving, and what are your...
Well, I think all automakers look at autonomous driving as the logical endpoint of the kind of technologies that they've been putting into cars for many years. I mean, from the very beginning, we had anti-lock brake systems. And that was the first kind of driver-assisted systems, where the car would regulate the way in which the brake was being pressed. Even though you're pressing down on the brake, it will continually and rapidly release and press on the brake, something you were trained to do many years ago. As we moved on, we had cruise control. And then cruise control expanded to adaptive cruise control, which allows you to maintain a fixed distance between you and the next car. There's automatic parallel parking, I can't parallel park to save my life because, you know, unless you live in a city, you don't really have to parallel park. Most places you go to a parking structure, you just pull right in.
You do in San Francisco.
In San Francisco, and you have to park on an angle. So that makes it even more difficult. But all of those technologies are leading towards the ultimate point where the car would drive itself. You essentially say, take me home, and the car goes. And that's a great concept, right? Who would not want that concept? The problem that we see, and the thing that worries researchers, is that anyone who buys an autonomous driving car buys it because they don't want to have to drive the car. So they're not going to be in the car with their hands poised over the wheel and their feet near the brake and the gas pedal watching the road, because if they're doing all of that, they might as well drive the car. The concept is that if you have an autonomous car, you could do other things,
So
like
are you
read.
are you thinking I have a chauffeur?
Essentially, you are being chauffeured by the car.
Okay.
Right? And it's just, they've changed the position where you sit. So you're not in the back seat, you're in the front. The difficulty is that there may be times when the car will have to transfer control back to the driver because the situation warrants that it's not sure what to do, and it says, I think you should take over, in essence. Now, the concern we have is that what you have to do in that case is to bring the driver's focus back to the driving environment, because he might be reading a report on his phone or a piece of paper. You have to pull their attention away from that towards the forward scene, have them recognize the situation, assess it, understand what they have to do, and then take corrective action in time. That's a lot of time to pull someone's attention away from something that
Yes.
they haven't been aware of, look at the road scene, make the proper assessment, take the corrective action. So how do you do that? That's the challenge that we have. And so while autonomous driving will ultimately come, it has to come in a way that we recognize how do we pull the driver's focus back to the driving environment. And that's a very difficult research challenge.
So you mentioned yesterday the driver workload tool.
Right. So one of the things that we look at when we're trying to assess how busy is the driver is what's going on around him. And so what we've done is we've created something called a driver workload estimate. Mm-hmm. And what it does is it takes essentially 3 sets of inputs. One is an assessment of what's going on around the car. Mm-hmm. And we can get that information because we have sensors on the car already. We have the radar from the front, which is used for cruise control. We might have ultrasonic backup sensors, which are sensing the environment off on the side. We could even have cameras mounted on the side mirrors, which are looking in the blind spots and so on. Mm-hmm. So we could get some idea of the 360 environment around the car. How busy is it? Is he driving all by himself on the road, or is he in heavy Chicago traffic, at rush hour? So that's one piece of information. The other is we know what the driver is doing inside the car. And that's because we know exactly what he's doing to the steering wheel, to the brake and the gas. We know if he's pushing buttons, which buttons he's pushing and where they are. So we know what he's doing inside the car. And if we have physiological instrumentation inside the car, we could also get assessment of his physiological state. Okay. So in some cases, we might have a heart rate monitoring seat, which is monitoring his heart rate. He might be wearing a device, one of the wearables that you'll see at the CES, which could connect through Bluetooth. Mm-hmm. And by connecting through Bluetooth to connect to the car and get that information. So we take all of that information, we aggregate it into a single metric, which is what we call a driver workload estimate. Mm. Now, if we know what that is, then we can be intelligent about what happens inside the car. So for example, if a phone call comes in and the driver workload estimate is very low, we let the phone call go through. But if it's very high, then we might send that phone call directly to voicemail, not alert the driver that a call is coming in, simply send it off to voicemail. So in that way, we don't add to the stress that the driver has. And stress is really the key thing. It's not necessarily the instantaneous kind of concern that you might have in an accident scenario, mm-hmm. but it could be a continuous long-term stress that the driver has. We've just gone through a really bad storm, which fortunately we escaped over in the Midwest. where you've had 8 inches, 12 inches, their polar vortex is sitting on top of them, snow all over the roads. It's an absolute nightmare. As you're driving through that, you could be driving for a half hour, an hour and a half, constantly stressed because you're not sure of your ability to control the car. If you hit an ice patch or something, the car could lose control. So when a driver is under that kind of condition, he's stressed all the time. And what we're trying to do is find ways to reduce that stress. And maybe technology that goes into the car can be used to help reduce that stress level.
It's actually really interesting just sitting here listening to you thinking, you guys are in stress management. I mean, you're
Right.
ultimately managing the drivers. I never really thought about the automobile, your role in designing the automobile. I just thought, what's the coolest things that you can add to the automobile? And we complain that something doesn't get added, but there's so many things psychologically and physiologically that are going into it.
There have been technologies, music, for example. Music hath power to soothe the savage breast is a famous quote, and it's there for a reason because music can be used to de-stress someone. Mm-hmm. There are apps out on the market, Hubu, I think, where the music selection, like Pandora makes a selection on a particular genre, Hubu can do it based on a particular mood that it would like to elicit. Now, music is a very challenging technology because what might be soothing to you, the same song might be not soothing to someone else because right. Music has an association with it in the time in which you first heard the song. Mm-hmm. So there are challenges to bringing in music as a de-stressor, but those are some things that a lot of people, a lot of universities have done research on to try to see how could we even use that to de-stress the driver.
Now, do you look at the, I'll just say the older generation differently when you're thinking about these additions and new developments? And how do you see this market differently? Because yeah. I imagine you're not designing cars just for, the 70, 65 plus, that you're thinking about them, but...
Right, so it depends on the technology that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So let me give you an example of where we would design, particularly for, say, an older driver. It's very difficult for an older driver who's sitting in the car to do this, to turn around and look behind. Mm-hmm. So technologies that come in which incorporate the ultrasonic backup sensing, as well as maybe a rear view camera, which gives an assessment of what they're driving back towards, is very helpful, particularly for an older population, because they don't have an easy way to do that physically. But an HMI design, which is good for an older driver to understand, if done well, could be great for a younger population as well. I mean, the Apple iPod, when it was created, was designed not for an older population or a younger population. It was designed for anyone who could simply look at the system and understand immediately how to operate it. That's great design. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to do the old enormous phone for older people where they have the massive numbers and such, where there's almost sort of a stigma associated with, look, I have to have this phone because I can't see the numbers and it's hard. That's not good design. Good design is something like the Apple iPod, where you understand immediately and intuitively what it is and how to operate it.
So let's move on a little bit to healthcare. We had the great opportunity to have you keynote Digital Health Summit a couple years ago for the doctor in your car, and it was really the first time we heard about the different types of technologies that are going to make their way into the automobile. So what kind of new developments, how do you guys look at health, and most importantly, where did that come from? How did that idea of health in the automobile come to be?
That's an interesting story, actually. The genesis of it was through Edsel Ford, whose son was diabetic.
Okay.
And Edsel had some connection with Medtronic. Medtronic is one of the leading manufacturers for medical devices. And one of the devices they were creating was a continuous glucose monitor, CGM. And what that does, for those of you who don't know it, is it not only measures your current blood sugar level, but it also gives a history in which way you're trending. So that's particularly important because if you're going low, if you're going hypoglycemic, low blood sugar. The symptoms are confusion, lightheadedness, and blurry vision. Those are problems if you're just sitting in your chair. They're particular problems if you're operating a vehicle while that happens. And so what we were interested in is understanding ways in which we could take advantage of that kind of technology, which could connect to the car because it connects through Bluetooth. And our sync system was able to connect to things like a Bluetooth phone, so it could connect to this device just as well. And get that reading and communicate that to the driver. This way he wouldn't have to fumble for the device to try to find it, get the reading. By visually looking at it, that takes his hands off the wheel and his eyes off the road. So we could just get that verbally through the car. So that led us into this notion that could we use connectivity in a positive way? Automakers have been blasted by places like the Department of Transportation because they viewed connectivity as simply an unnecessary entertainment feature. Ways in which you could play Pandora or tweet or send post Facebook status and so on. But if connectivity can be shown to be a key enabler for making the driver safer while he's inside the vehicle, then that would be a great benefit. And it would essentially change the paradigm of connectivity and also the national dialogue on it.
So where do you see it going? So I know you started with Medtronic and WellDoc, and I would imagine, I mean, I've heard little inklings of, weight sensors in the seats, being able to send that data upon impact, a car impact, to the hospital. And you mentioned yesterday there were challenges around. I'd love you to share that a little bit.
So we have the technology, obviously, to have cameras inside the vehicle and to have images transmitted anywhere we like. So it's not unreasonable. In fact, we've shown concept cars of this type where there are cameras mounted inside the vehicle which can see everything inside the passenger compartment, and upon impact could take an image and transmit that information, for example, to the emergency responders. So when an ambulance is coming, it's critically important for them to understand what the situation is that they're coming to. And if they know that there are people inside the vehicle who have a particular medical condition, they could see what it looks like inside the car. They could be far better prepared to come, and it could be the difference between life and death on arrival. But as with everything, there's always another side to this coin, and that is the privacy issue. People, particularly in this country, are very concerned about privacy, what information is being shared, especially when it goes off to the cloud. Some people don't want you to know who was in the car with you when perhaps something happened. And so we have to balance the concerns that people have for their own privacy, with the reality that this could be very beneficial for them if, in fact, they are in an accident. And it's critical for the emergency responders to know. So there are always challenges. It's never a clear-cut, let's do this because this makes sense, because there's always a counter-argument to it.
How do you manage, as a company, how do you manage what features to put forward? I would imagine your playbook is major. How do you manage these choices?
Well, to some extent, we try to do it for the most bang for the buck. If you look at it, the first two applications that we looked at was in diabetes and in allergies. Because from a population standpoint, there are about 26 million diabetics in the US alone, and there are about 60 million people who suffer from allergies or asthma. So if you were just to place your card down, since we're in Vegas, place your bet down on something, you want to bet it down on something that could have a significant return. And so diabetes and allergies were key to that. But we see that in the future, especially for older drivers, it's really important to understand what their condition is and to communicate that, not only to them, but potentially to other caregivers that they have. As we reach sort of middle age, we find ourselves in a unique position where we might be caregivers for two ends of the spectrum. One being that we have kids, young kids, who are driving now for the first time perhaps, and they might have medical conditions. And then on the other side, we might have elderly parents who are still alive and potentially still driving. And we'd like to know, are both of them safe when they're out on the road? If you have, my son is diabetic, my father-in-law is 94, and he still drives. Don't be out on the road while he's out there. It's always a challenge. But he's driving, diabetic child is driving. And so, you have both of these concerns, and it would be great to know that they're doing it safely, that they've gotten home safely. And if you had a car that was able to monitor the situation, let you know what's going on, give you the peace of mind that things are okay, that's very valuable to drivers.
So, kind of a twofold question is, where do you see the future of healthcare within the automobile? Actually, we'll start with that one.
So I think there's a great opportunity for healthcare inside the car, because there are a lot of concerns about drivers doing it safely. From an insurance standpoint, there are tremendous potential benefits for it, not just from the automotive insurance standpoint, but from the medical insurance standpoint. So you could potentially, if you were part of sort of a program that you signed up for, that recorded what your condition was, sent information to your primary care physician, showed that you were participating in a plan, then you could get benefits not only from your car insurance, but your medical insurance. So there's opportunities for everyone, not only for the safety of people on the road, but in your own pocketbook and for your own well-being.
And on the heels of that, I know within healthcare, and I imagine other areas, you've created these partnerships. I know your initial partnerships were with Medtronic and WellDoc. How do you, I imagine your goal is to partner with other companies, but how do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we're trying to convey is the idea that we're very receptive to either app developers or product developers who have ways to make that connection to the car through the connectivity capabilities, through Bluetooth, through maybe Wi-Fi, and such. If we can get that kind of connection, and if the information that they're providing is relevant to the driving situation, then we'd like to talk to you and get ideas about how we could potentially
integrate.
Participate. Right.
Okay. So this is a broad question, but do you see the autonomous car coming soon? Or how far away do we think we are?
I think we are a good bit away. It's a difficult thing to decide, especially in this country. We're very litigious in the U.S., and so you could easily imagine that as someone drives a car that is autonomous and they get into an accident, who's responsible? Was it the driver who was in the car at the time? Is it the manufacturer who created a system that claimed to be able to do it? And so I think there are a lot of discussions that need to happen before we see a large-scale implementation of a driverless vehicle. But I think ultimately something like that will come. And the reality is that we already have many of the components of it now in our car. We do routinely let go of the gas pedal when we're driving because the cruise control is taking care of it. Ultimately, very soon, we'll be able to even let go of the steering wheel if we simply want to stay in the lane, provided, of course, that the lane markings are very clear, because the cameras need to see the lane markings very well. And so that's possible, but it's terrifying to some people to think that they take their hands off the wheel and the car does it. Yet people would do it when it's parallel parking, right? They'll sit back and the wheel will spin rapidly, and it's very unnerving to do that the first time, because you think, oh, the car's going to hit something, and yet it probably does a much better job. It certainly does a better job than I do.
So let's see, we have a couple more minutes. So 2 last questions then. One is, what features, I didn't ask you this yesterday, but I'm just curious, what features do you think are the most, I'll say senior friendly? What features do you think that you guys have right now that?
I guess I'd say one of the most senior friendly would be something very simple, It's the ultrasonic backup sensors, maybe coupled with a rear camera. I don't know about you, but I've been driving a car with ultrasonic sensors for many years now, and when I get into a car that doesn't have it, I'm just
We forget how to
terrified
park.
as I'm backing up that I'm going to hit something because I can't see it. It's very hard to see, especially depending on the type of vehicle that you're driving. You may not be able to see easily out the back window. But the comfort that you hear the beeps, you know when you're getting close, you're able to stop. I think a technology that has languished for some time because we've never been able to get the HMI quite right is night vision. And I think that at some point when we get that right, that will also be a great benefit. To be able to recognize potential threats out on the side of the road, which are hard to see. People who have dark clothing on, they're walking at night along the side of the road, nearly impossible to see them. Those kind of technologies, I think, would be very helpful. For seniors, certainly, for all people, I think, in general. But particularly for seniors, as we talked about earlier, where it's very difficult for them to physically maneuver around. And so if they can stay in one position and yet see everything that's important to them, I think that would be a great benefit.
And so if you look at the next 5 years, where do you see automobile development going?
I think the biggest thing that you'll probably see is in the active safety arena. For many years in the past, passive safety was the thing, which passive safety simply means things like airbags and such. So if you're going to get into an accident, and these are things which are designed to minimize the impact on your body when you're in a crash. So front airbag, side airbag, curtains, we've got many bags now inside vehicles to protect you. The crash zones have been improved significantly and so on. But active safety is designed to prevent you from getting into the accident in the first place, or if you're going to get into the accident, to try to mitigate the effect of that accident. And I think that's a technology area where you'll see a lot of advancement in the next 5 years.
So I'm going to share my Ford story. This year, I bought my first Ford, and I'll tell you the one feature, and it's maybe it is senior friendly. Maybe I should start looking at myself differently. But it was the foot. You swipe your foot under the tailgate, and the door and the lift opens. And I have had 2 back surgeries. We're hoping not for a third. And it literally, it wasn't designed for seniors.
Yes.
I think it was designed for me.
Yep.
And it sold me. But aside from the fact that I'm instantly in the car. I sound like an infomercial right now. I'm instantly in the car, and my phone connected. But it was just simplicity of things. And I think that I do a lot of work in healthcare, and we're coming into this things that we just want it to work, and we don't expect to have to sync and cords and blah 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 blah. So I think that to me was the most exciting about it, which is what turned me on to it,
Right.
So
yeah, I think that is the key, and that goes back to this notion of the HMI, getting the HMI correct. People want it to simply work. They're not averse to technology per se, but what they want is technology that is easy for them to understand and to take advantage of. And that's the real challenge. Anyone can make a technology that accomplishes a certain task. The real genius is in making it happen in a way that's almost transparent to them.
Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much. Thank you for sitting in for Cheryl. It was an amazing conversation. I hope you all agree. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Oh, thank you.